Hi friends, my name is Mkosha Fungajenga, and today we are privileged to be here with the Minister of Health, Honorable Sylvia Masebo. Thank you so much for being here and accepting to have this conversation.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, so over the past few weeks, I have been running a series of articles in the newspaper, News Diggers, as well as on Facebook and YouTube, trying to reach out to as many people as possible on this new journey that I am on in my journalism career, which is to report more on health and to have more health education out there. And this started because in February I lost my mother to endometrial cancer. And prior to then, I had no idea what endometrial cancer was. And if I had no idea, I imagine that there are also a lot of other people out there who do not get to know about certain conditions that can afflict either ourselves or our loved ones. And so I saw the need for us to have more of content which is going to be on health. And apart from not having a lot of content on health locally, we also experienced a lot of problems in the hospitals, and this is something which I have also written about. And these are some of the issues which we hope to speak to the minister about. Because when my mother was in hospital, for example, there were issues where some doctors would not see them when they were supposed to be there, and we had to rely on Google searches to understand some of the things that were happening and a lot of other problems. If you are interested to know, you can simply just read some of those articles. But today we thought we could sit down with the minister and have a conversation about our health sector and see really the minister's vision of where we go from here and a lot more of other questions. So stay tuned. Yes.
First of all, just to convey my condolences in the loss of your mom. I myself lost my mom over 15 years ago now, and it feels like I lost her last year or last week. So I can relate when you say you lost your mom, and I think for you, it's even worse that the situation in the hospital, as you keep talking about it, was desperate, if I may use that word. And I know that it might not just be yourself who have gone through such an experience. But let me just get back to the issues surrounding our health sector in the country. So you say, for example, you had your mom who was suffering from some cancer, and at the point when you needed the doctors, you said there was no doctor in most cases, and I suppose you were being attended to mainly maybe by nurses, and in some cases, if you're lucky of course, some junior doctors. I think one of our greatest challenges in the health sector currently is the issue of staffing. So the establishment for Ministry of Health, as we found it in 2021 of August, up until now, was way below 50%. This means that you have a situation where maybe the doctor ratio, the doctor-patient ratio is very high, just like the nurse and patient ratio is. Simply put, we do not have enough health workers in our facilities, whether at the lower levels of our hospital facilities or indeed at the higher levels. I think when you get to specialized hospitals like cancer, or even tertiary hospitals like UTH or Levy, which is dealing with complicated illnesses like the heart hospital, you begin to see the need or the gaps when it comes to specialized doctors. So that is the situation we found. But what are we doing about that situation? I think you are aware that last year We tried as a ministry, of course as a government, in response to our party manifesto. One of the issues we articulated was simply that we will increase the number of health workers. And so last year, we had over 12,000 health workers that we employed, and we have since placed them so that we are now not below 50%. We are above 50%, I think 54, 55%, or about there, thereabout. And so there is, since this year, I want to say that there is a bit of improvement, but not sufficient. And because of that, this year, the government has proceeded on again, helping the Ministry of Health to employ more workers. What are we doing this year? This year, in terms of employing, we want to motivate the health staff by not just employing more, workers, but looking at those workers that have been in employment, but although they're senior doctors, or they're specialist doctors, or they're consultants, or now somebody is a midwifery nurse, after so many years, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, some of them I'm told even 10 years, they have upped their, their experiences and even their qualifications, but yet, although you call them consultants, although you call her a midwifery, the salary is that of maybe an enrolled nurse or maybe a junior doctor. So you can see there that apart from less numbers, you have a workforce that is demotivated, which is normal and natural. That if I'm a degree holder, but I'm not getting a salary like a degree holder, I'm getting a salary like I'm a certificate holder. Obviously, I'll get frustrated, I'll get demotivated. So that's the kind of scenario that we have currently, that we have a number of health workers under the Ministry of Health who are working as if they're consultants, who are working as if they're senior doctors, who are working as senior practitioners of different categories, but the salary is still the salary they were getting 5-10 years ago. Why? Because government did not increase their salaries according to their qualifications. So the same entry qualification or the entry salary is still what somebody is getting 5-10 years later. So what we want to do this year, using the amount of resources that has been given to us to employ the 3,000 plus, we want to use that to try and now begin to recognize them as such, by way of getting authority to promote them to what they're supposed to be, and to start paying them for what they are, because they're performing a function, a high function, and yet receiving a low salary. So obviously that can be demotivating. So that is one. The second point, obviously, as we promote these people and raise them to their correct positions and correct salary scale, obviously we'll create space at the bottom. Then we can now fill up the bottom space with new entrants. So that is one of the things that we're going to do this year, and in fact we've started talking to the various associations. As you know, Ministry of Health is not just about doctors. We have senior doctors, consultants, but we also have junior doctors, and they have their own association. We also have the clinical officers. We also have laboratory officers. Then we have the nursing fraternity, and then we have, of course, the general workers. Those that work in the laundry, in the kitchen, in the garden, inside cleaning. All those form part of the health workforce. But we do not have a problem with those numbers. The problem is the specialized one. So that is an area that really we are going to be looking at very seriously this time. The second part is that, and which is the most important part, is that we have now a population of citizens that really have not paid attention to health issues. And in the past, Zambia had a disease burden of communicable diseases like HIV, you know, cholera, that kind of. But now we see more of the non-communicable diseases, which are now, of course, coming on the fore. And obviously the cancers is one such disease. And what has happened is that we kind of, as a population, know much about these non-communicable diseases, but we don't know much about the non-communicable diseases and the causes of those non-communicable diseases. In the past, you know, this is where you used to hear somebody's suffering from cancer. We didn't even know it was cancer. We would think somebody has been bewitched. Okay, and unfortunately, these kind of diseases now are on the rise. And what we've noticed is that this is mainly because of our lifestyles, what we eat, how we live, you know, no exercise, eating too much processed foods, and you know, frequently for that matter. And so we see a big rise there. And obviously, when you talk of cancers, we only have one cancer hospital in the country, and this is the cancer hospital center, the one at UTH. And when you look at that hospital, I remember that around 206 or 205, 6, 7, that was the time when the cancer hospital was truly doing its best, you know, because the equipment was new then, you know, and the numbers of people suffering from cancer in the country was not as huge. And I recall that time that we even used to have patients from countries around the region. That's how good that cancer hospital was. But that's 15 to 20 years ago. Obviously, the equipment in that hospital is obsolete. It's obsolete. In fact, next year, 2024, we have been advised that we can no longer repair that equipment. We just have to throw it away completely and replace it with completely new. Now, this is not cheap equipment, and unfortunately, as a country, I think that we didn't do well in terms of, you know, continuous maintenance, continuous re-equipping, so that we don't wait for all this equipment to, you know, to lose its lifetime and get to a point where, you know, every day you're fixing it. It's not. Last year, when I was new minister and I was told that the equipment in the cancer hospital was non-functional, I called the staff there, had a meeting with them, what are the issues? They said, oh, this and the other and that and that. I said, do a report. They did a report. So how much money do we need? No, for this spare part we need 55 million. For this one we need 50 million. For this one, I just said, look, this is an emergency. I said to the Treasury, let's give, you know, the Department of Finance, let's give this money so that they can get the spares that they get. And they did fix it. I think it only went for a month or 2 months. It was done.
And all that money.
It was like money in the, you know, just wasted money, yes. So it became clear to us that the equipment cannot be fixed anymore, and we just need to completely replace it. So the process of replacements has started. There are different avenues that we've looked at. What has been one of our challenges is the slow process of procurement. That is what seems to have taken a bit of time, but we are hopeful that this year we should be able to, you know, be able to say on this date we would have refurbished the whole cancer hospital, and of course opening new centers. We're trying to decentralize cancer hospital, I think one in Southern Province, Livingstone in particular, and another one in the Copper Belt, because currently the whole country, they come to this cancer hospital. And when they come, the patients, it's just a sad story. All I can say, we need to replace the whole cancer hospital, new equipment. We need to open new centers outside the country, I mean outside Lusaka as a center, so that we have at least 3 points. Yes. So even there, when you talk about how many patients we have, I'm told, I think in a year, about 3,000 patients walk past that cancer hospital. But in a year so far now, the numbers of patients that the hospital is able to attend to is something around 1,200, you know. But now, even that 1,200, they are having challenges. The numbers are going down. I think maybe they're doing something like 800 only. So it means the rest are being left just to die. Basically, that's a short story to that sad situation.
I'm sorry, before we move on to away from this point, on the equipment, is it, you said procurement is slow, so does that mean that on the budget side, it's already there, the money is already there, or do you need some support, say, from donors?
Well, we had last year, for example, budgeted for some big equipment, maybe CT scan. Yes, but last year that CT scan was not purchased. I think it's this year that the process has been ongoing. Basically, what I'm saying is that we seem to have had challenges in the procurement chain, supply chain, because of the ZPPA Act, and that is the process that seems it's not as easy as people think it is, you know, whereby you just get up, maybe you advertise, and you have few people that come and say they want to buy or they want to supply, and then you pick the best. Yeah, it looks like according to ZAMSA, they've had some challenges. For example, I'll give you an example. Last year, we gave resources to ZAMSA, which is the procurement agency, to purchase 100 ambulances. And that money was released on time. I'm aware that ZAMSA did advertise, because you can see it on open lines, because whatever they want to purchase, they advertise it. So they advertised. After they opened the bids, they said that the bidders who had put in their bids did not meet the specifications which they had put forward. So it meant that according to the law, they had to re-advertise it again. So at the moment, I think that they have re-advertised it, and I think that they could be at the stage of doing evaluations. I'm not exactly sure. As you know, as ministers, the issue of procurement is not a matter that you really get involved with, you know, apart from making sure that, one, you give them the resources, and two, they give you their procurement plan for the year. So the procurement plan for last year was that we should have purchased 100 ambulances. But by December, ZAMSA had not managed to procure the ambulances. I also know that we had people who ordinarily would think that they would have managed to successfully bid, but again it was said that the specifications that ZAMSA had put for the same ambulances, the specs which they put there, those big suppliers felt that this was not for them. Maybe it was for other countries like China, where they have a variety of quality and medium and low quality stuff. So it did not go through. And if it doesn't go through, it means you have to re-advertise it again. So we are hopeful that this year, since they started early, that and the advert has gone through. I don't know at what stage they are in their procurement process, but we are hoping that you know, in the first half of the year, this should have been concluded, and we should be saying that the ambulances are on their way.
Do you think we need then to review the procurement process, especially for the Ministry of Health? Because what I understand is that it's the same, whether it's you're trying to purchase vehicles or whether you're trying to purchase medical equipment, it's the same. Yes. Do you think it should continue, or maybe the rules must be reviewed when it comes to the ministry?
I think it's not just the Ministry of Health. I think that the Procurement Act, or the ZPPA Act, I think it's of 2018, 2018 or 2021, 2018 I think, has been said to be very cumbersome in terms of procedures. Now, if you are buying a vehicle or you are buying, you know, some tools, mechanical tools, it is fine maybe. But when you're dealing with issues of drugs and medical equipment, those are items which are like you need them yesterday, especially when you find yourself in a situation where you don't have enough ambulances. So the need for ambulances didn't happen this year, not even last year, not even the other last year. Even from the day we took office, we knew that we had need for ambulances. We had need to improve on the quantities of drugs in the country. We knew that we needed more health workers. We knew. Now you see, for things like health workers, we just advertised. People applied. We were able to employ them, and we were able to place them. But when it comes to procurement, remember that 95% of medical products, starting from drugs, medical equipment, and consumables, all these items are not produced in Zambia. And Zambia has been importing these items from India, from China, from South Africa, from many other countries of the world. I think the weakness has been that even as we procure, we have in the past not procured from the manufacturers. We have allowed the situation where we have middlemen who either go to these countries and go to the manufacturers and buy and bring and sell. That has been the kind. In terms of the industry, we do have very, very few industries. I can think of Yash, for example. It's one of what I would call the biggest pharmaceutical industry. We have 1-2 others, and although we have these, they do not have the capacity as local industries to meet the demand. What I hear from ZAMSA is that they have in the past, for example, contracted some of our local manufacturers to produce simple things like Panadol and the like, cough mixtures and things like that, which they have been producing and giving to ZAMSA, but it is not sufficient. And the production is not like very quickly, whereby you get to a point where you tell them, no, we don't need anymore. It's that type where you are always waiting for them to supply to you if they are producing locally. So obviously, as government, the president gave that policy directive, which is in line with our UPND manifesto, and which says that it's time to create our own pharmaceutical industry here. And I'm sure you've seen that the president had an engagement with the European African Business People Forum, which he officiated. Arising from that, I myself had a health and EU pharmaceutical meeting or conference. We have a committee that has been meeting to work out all the necessary modalities. And so, we have had engagements with the private sector locally and the investors from the European side that have come to Zambia to try and partner with the local people in setting up manufacturing plants. We are desirous as a nation to get to a point where Zambia can produce over 90% of its own medical needs. And apart from that, of course, including vaccines, we are desirous of all that. And that is part of our mission as a nation. And we have started, there's been very good progress. And we are hoping that within the next 2 years, we should be able to see some industry in the manufacturing sector. And then we should be able to get to a point where we can import, we can get 90% or even just 70%. If we can reach 70% of what we need, for our health sector, and then we're importing 30 or less than that, then we'll say we have gotten somewhere, because that way we shall create employment for our people. And also the disruptions of drugs will not be that bad. There are some drugs, even some vaccines, that are not even available, not just in Zambia, which some manufacturers have stopped. Have stopped manufacturing for one reason or the other. And so when you get in such a situation, then you find yourself in trouble. Recently, for example, as a nation, we were looking for cholera vaccines. We ran out. We had some, we ran out. Why? Because the manufacturers had stopped manufacturing those vaccines. During the COVID time, Zambia was very much affected, not just in many countries, because industry shut down. And so you really had to line up, even if you had the money. So the pharmaceutical industry is a tricky industry. But
and just speaking about the drugs, could we just also delve into the Egypt deal, because right now it's making so much noise. It appears maybe a lot of us don't really understand what's going on. Yes, so.
Okay, so I'll get to that. So I was talking about the fact that Zambia imports most of its drugs through local business people, both Zambian and foreign.
Yes.
But most of these, they have to go either to India or to China or wherever they prefer. They get the drugs and they supply to government. So, like I said, that process has had its own challenges. And so for us to really stabilize the drug availability in our health facilities, we needed to buy bulk. What do I mean? I meant that if we buy bulk, like you buy drugs that should last you for a year, and they land into the country at your ZAMSA, it means that even when you distribute those drugs and you become low maybe by 1 month or 2 months, at that point, when you become low by 1 month, you can make your orders, okay? And by the time the long process comes through, you would have reduced your bulk purchase by 3 months. So meaning that 3 months would have been, covered. And therefore, every time you would have drugs all the time for the whole year. But the problem is that we've been buying a little bit here, and whatever you buy will only last you for less than 3 months, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 1 month, that kind of arrangement. And so you find that it's not only expensive in terms of the cost, it's also expensive in terms of time, because all the time ZAMSA is buying little from their suppliers, and then they have to continuously keep distributing. Even distributing becomes a big cost because you keep going back and forth to replace. So that has been one of the problems. The second problem is theft. There's been high theft of drugs, unfortunately for us, and this obviously has been going on for a long time, but we have not done much to stop the stealing of drugs. We made a decision that we had to come up with what they call trace and tracking, so that from the manufacturers you have what they call maybe like a kind of a barcode, where that drug is traced from the manufacturers to ZAMSA, from ZAMSA to a facility, and up to the end user. That way you are able to know that, okay, we gave you so many drugs, and we expect these drugs to finish within a particular period of time. So that process of tracking drugs has really not been existent. And there seems to be loopholes. And so there's been a number of arrests so far that have been done. Western Province, Eastern Province, Western Province, Eastern Province, Copperbelt Province, and Lusaka recently. I'm sure you saw somebody, a driver from one of the health centers, these level 1 hospitals. I can't remember if it's Matero or Mandebo, I can't remember. Yeah. Even in Chongwe, for example, we know that we've also caught some people. What is good is that people are getting caught. Yeah, so ARVs, Coartem, all these high value drugs are being stolen. That is the biggest challenge that we are facing now. The other third point that we think is also a problem is that if you've noticed the last 2 years, suddenly there's a mushrooming of a lot of private pharmacies, and some of them very near to health facilities, that just opposite the hospital, opposite a clinic. You're seeing a number of pharmacies. The question is, where are those drugs coming from? And we hear that a number of these pharmacies are owned by some health workers. So obviously, your guess is as good as mine. We've had stories of certain drugs from the hospital finding themselves in these private pharmacies, and some people have been arrested. We're trying to do our best to ensure that we stop this pilfering of drugs by coming up with something under the Ministry of Technology, under the Smart Zambia, so that we can basically trace and track the drugs, and we can be able to know exactly, and account for the drugs that we are buying. Because if we don't do that, the problem of shortages will continue. Even if we get bulk, a lot of these drugs will still be stolen. We also have a situation where some of the drugs are being taken in the neighboring countries. We've heard of our drugs going to some of the neighboring countries in the region. And so that again has become a big problem. The other problem is the issue of overprescribing. I don't know, you are a Zambian, you know what it is. A lot of Zambian women now, or Zambian people, even when they get sick, they don't even go to the hospital, they just go to a pharmacy and get medicine, And also sometimes when they go to a hospital, a doctor just gives them an injection. They'll say, they haven't given me medicine, they just gave me an injection. Sometimes they even force, health workers like, no, last time when I was sick, the drug I took is this, so maybe just give me a prescription, that kind of thing. So you find that I'm being told that this is also an issue that we need to address, this over prescription. That is another issue. The fifth issue to do with drugs is basically that, like I said, we are importing. We don't have a local industry. It's to set up industry. And that, like I said, we're doing that, and we're hoping that in the next 2 years or so, obviously, we should get to a place where we can basically get to a point where we can basically have our own industry here. The other point is the point that if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, it's an industry of mainly people who are either Zambian Indian or foreign Indians. Those are the majority in this industry. And if you look at the whole industry, you will find that there has been issues of corruption. There have been issues of overpricing. It's a very competitive business. And you find that Zambia as a country has lost a lot of money in the pharmaceutical industry because even the pricing of some of the products has been over and above. I'll give you an example. For example, you can import a particular product from South Africa or even from Zimbabwe nearby if they're producing it, and you land it here in Zambia, and even if it's landed, it's 100% cheaper than getting it from here. Now, obviously, we want to promote local industry, but we are not going to promote local industry that you can even see that they're trying to steal from government by overpricing. Last year, I tried to do some investigation from the industry to say, why is this price very high? Because it's cheaper for me to import. If it's cheaper for me to import by 20%, 10%, maybe we can say, okay, but not 100%. If I can get something landed here at 10 kwacha, why would I pay 21 or 25 kwacha? More than double. I'll avoid that because I have to make good use of the money. You've heard what the president has been preaching. He's been talking about value, good price, timely delivery. Those are the three. So if you're getting 1 out of 3, then you can't get that. If maybe it's just 2 out of 1 out of 3, which is a problem, maybe you can give a blind eye. But if 2 of the most important conditions of that purchase is not in line, you find yourself that refusing to buy from that supplier, even if he is local. And some of the issues obviously was that we are producing is more expensive because we are paying duties like VAT and things like that for imported materials or raw materials for us to produce these drugs. And of course, when I tried to find out from the Minister of Finance to see whether he could help us, he said, well, this VAT, they reclaim it. So what is the issue? So you can't say that we are charging VAT, that's why this price is expensive. Then they went round, they said, no, the reason why we're expensive is because the previous government never used to pay us, they used to take 1 year, and so we had to hedge our losses. And we said, well, this time around, it's different. We'll pay you as good as cash on delivery. So then it means that your prices must come down. So that also was an issue that we had to go around to get people to know that we're not just going to buy because it's local and you want to cheat government, because it's public resources and we must care for it. So also those were also some of the challenges that we've had to go through. Obviously, people have come to know that this government is a straightforward government in terms of dealing with the public, and that we do what we say. You know, if we say we'll pay, we will pay. If we say we'll not buy from you because we think you're very expensive, we will not buy. So the music that, you know, the song that, no, but I'm local, why aren't you buying, will not arise. So those are some of the issues around the issue of purchase of drugs in the country. So what have we tried to do as a government to try and bridge these challenges that we're facing? Some of the things that we've done, like one, we know that government is seriously reviewing ZPPA Act, you know, and that process has already started under the Ministry of Finance, you know. So I think before the end of this year, of course, maybe by mid this year, we'll see a new relaxed ZPPA Act that will help us be able, not just us, but also other procuring entities, government entities, they'll find that, especially parastatals, they'll be able to purchase quickly, you know, so that we can have a positive impact. So that is one. Then the second point is the issue of ZAMSA as a procurement entity. If you recall, before we took office, ZAMSA only had two functions. That is to store products on behalf of the Ministry of Health, that's on behalf of government as an agency, and secondly to deliver the same products throughout the country up to the last mile. Those were the two functions. But I think in 2018, the new act was put in place, which was the ZAMSA Act, and this act gave an extra role to ZAMSA, and this role, which is the major role now, is to procure. So you have ZAMSA, it has a board that is appointed by the minister, and then it has a chief executive and management that is appointed by the board. Okay? And then the ministry, through the Minister of Health, who appoints the board, gives policy guidelines according to our manifesto. And so the day-to-day running of ZAMSA is under the board. ZAMSA will come up with a budget, for example, management, that they will take to the board. The board will approve that. The board will send that to government, to the minister, and the minister will approve it, or government will approve it. So once that is approved, then the day-to-day implementation of that budget remains the function of the board. Okay?
Yes.
So, in 2021 August, when we took office, we found that the then government had already brought the ZAMSA Act into effect, meaning a statutory instrument was issued by the then Minister of Health to bring the Act into operation, what you call operationalizing the Act.
Yes.
What that meant in effect was that the Ministry of Health, as the original purchaser of medicines, drugs, was no longer had that responsibility by law. So it meant that the ones who had that responsibility was ZAMSA board and its management. Okay?
Yes.
So ZAMSA board and its management are supposed to procure the drug, they're supposed to keep the drugs, they're supposed to distribute the drugs. I think our role is supposed to be that of policy and ensuring that whatever they do, even whatever they buy, it is what we, the purchasing, the consuming entities, our hospitals would have requested from ZAMSA. So that's basically what we found in terms of the acts. But I think that around 2021, maybe from January to August, the Ministry of Health had continued doing some procurement. Obviously, totally against the Act, because the Act then had said we no longer should have been buying the drugs. Of course, they may have gotten some waivers because they brought the Act to be operational before they were ready, before they even knew, you know. So even as we took over, ZAMSA was like a shell, really. They were just sitting there, really. There was really nothing much going on there because the procurement was still being effected by Ministry of Health. So ZAMSA was like waiting that, oh, there's a new act and we are supposed to be doing this, but it has not yet been given to us. When I looked in the files, I actually found that there was a letter that the Ministry of Health, of course, had written a letter to the Ministry of Finance to say we are not ready, so can you allow us to continue purchasing? And so that's how they continued purchasing. And obviously, you know what was going on, you know what was, and all the problems associated with those kind of purchases. So obviously, one of the things we didn't want to do, personally as minister, I didn't want to continue that arrangement. And because as far as I was concerned, we did not have the legal mandate. So I didn't understand why we should continue being the ones responsible for purchases. And also, I didn't want to get embroiled in governance issues, if I may use that word.
Corruption.
When I say governance issues, meaning you are doing something which the law does not permit you. Okay. You yourself, as minister, you have already signed the statutory instrument to say this is no longer my job, because
then you
but you continue, because the wise thing would have been not to sign the statutory instrument that brings the law into operation. I'll give you an example. Currently, there is an act which the previous administration put in place, that is the cannabis, to grow cannabis.
Yes.
Okay? The law was already passed in parliament, many things were already done. What is only remaining is the minister to issue a statutory instrument, and once you issue it, then the law becomes alive. What I've done, because I've seen that there's a lot of things that still need to be done, so I've not signed the statutory instrument to operationalize that, because we've started by making sure that we put in place capacity of ZAMRA, the regulator, capacity of ZNS, who is supposed to be one of the people, and the others, and all the pieces of legislation that are in conflict under the DEC, which is under Minister of Home Affairs. Okay, so I've not rushed just to operationalize it because it will have an impact. Okay, but the previous administration went ahead to sign the statutory, and hence what you may call the disruption in the supply chain. Now you have a new institution, you have some contracts that were under the Ministry of Health. This is a new entity. We must give the chance to the new entity to begin its own process. That is to advertise, to do its own valuation, to do its own choosing of who it's going to work with. So it was not automatic, that whatever was happening in the previous administration must happen, because now that was under Ministry of Health. This is now as good as a statutory body. It's a corporate body that can sue and that can be sued in its own right with the board. So how do you then think that this institution must do things that were being done under the old Ministry of Health that had the mandate? Of course, from a legal point of view, obviously it was not going to be like that. So when you hear people say no, the minister, she disrupted because she didn't like. I didn't have to like anybody. The act was very clear. That's sometimes like I tell you, I feel lazy to talk. For me, I said to myself, look, what are they talking about? Because for me, when I came out, I read, it says, no, you are no longer supposed to buy. I said, who's supposed to buy ZAMSA? Can you? And we have done quite a lot to ZAMSA to try and help it to grow wings and to be able to fly. And that's why when it came to the budget on drugs, we found that the budget on drugs was 1.3 billion. And by the way, that 1.3 billion which was in the budget was not even spent by ZAMSA. It was spent by the Ministry of Health against the act. You get the point, you know? So if people are talking about illegalities, for me, those are the illegalities. But obviously, sometimes maybe those illegalities, people get caught up because they find that they've done something, and yet the law is saying something, and then they realize the capacity is not there, so they are forced to do something, of course, to what I can say, to remedy a situation, you know. So for me, the first steps was, this law is saying you are the parties and not me. So then you say, okay, I don't have money. Say, okay, here's the money. You know, last year we only had 1.3 billion. Now we have 3.4 billion. So from 1.3 billion, we give you 3.4 billion. Obviously, money talks. One would expect that money would be the critical issue. The second issue would be human resource. Of course, human resource, again, it is ZAMSA to advertise, to get people to come and do what? And apply, and they decide to choose. It's not the minister to choose that who should be DG. It's not the minister to choose who should be a procurement person. No. But the minister has interest. If, for example, ZAMSA goes and employs a DG who is a grade 7, and somebody comes and tells me, can you imagine ZAMSA employed a grade 7 for DG? I have a job, a mandate, because the mandate to procure drugs and medical equipment rests with the Ministry of Health. And because that's a statutory body, obviously at that stage, I would have to interfere. I would have to say, you have employed somebody. No, you can't proceed with that employment. They can't tell me, no, that's what we want, we're a board. There's nothing like that. I would have to say no. And if they do not implement what the law says or what is supposed to be the right thing, I, as an appointing authority of the board, I can dissolve that board and fire that chief executive. Everybody can be fired using those powers of the board. So if I speak to the board, we all have a common interest to save our nation. And if what I'm saying to the board or the advice I'm giving the board makes sense, the board will take it. If the board thinks what I'm advising them is not good enough, the board has the right to say no. Okay? They have the right to say no. But the beauty of this kind of law is that I have the last right myself as an appointing authority. If I think that the board is not doing what I think is right, I have the right to disappoint them and choose another board. Just like my appointing authority, the president, expect me to do something. And if he reaches a stage where he thinks that I'm not doing according, he has the right to say, no, step aside, let me give you somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, that is how these issues, you know, that's what happens. So there's nothing sinister about that. Okay? So, like I said, the ZAMSA are the procuring entity of all drugs and some other medical supplies. And so if or when there is a problem there, obviously it affects the whole chain. But I want to say that if you get to ZAMSA now, you will find that quite a lot has happened. A lot has happened. Maybe they're not talking a lot as they should, but I know for a fact that there's been a lot of improvements. We've had a lot of support from cooperating partners, and I also know that the systems there, the systems of procurement, the systems of storage, the systems of transportation, all those, you know, more hubs in the provinces so that the goods from ZAMSA do not have to get straight from ZAMSA to the last mile, whereby they're able to take to the wholesale, to the whole warehouse in Eastern Province, in Western Province, and now I think Northwestern, there's a new construction going there. But at the end of the day, our desire and our plan is that all the 10 provinces should have its own warehouse hub, so that at that stage, it is that warehouse hub in each province that distributes to the facilities and up to the last mile. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot has happened at ZAMSA. Maybe they've just not been able to articulate what they have done, but there's been a lot of progress in the structure, in ensuring that they grow the institution, both in terms of human resource, in terms of the budget, in terms of systems, and so the only aspect that is now remaining is the actual action of purchasing goods. And of course, like I've said, that one of their challenges is the process that they have. It's quite a bit of work, and we hope that with the amendments of ZPPA Act, I think that things will be better. We also, as a ministry, looking at what has happened now, we also want to make some amendments to the ZAMSA Act itself. Because as government, as central government, when things get bad at a statutory, the easiest is to dissolve or get people to leave that institution and get new staff. But obviously sometimes that is not the best. So what we are trying to do is to ensure that whilst the major function of procurement remains with ZAMSA, we feel that the ministry should be able to intervene by doing the purchase themselves when they see that there's a failure on the part of ZAMSA. Okay? So that is one amendment that we're trying to do. The second amendment that we've been trying to come up with is on the definition of medical drugs and medical supplies. Our understanding of the term drugs and medical supplies means the actual medicines and also commodities, for example, for commodities that you'd use in the lab to do testing, commodities that you'd use for renal machines, for them to function, But unfortunately, it looks like the definition, and that is the definition of under the WHO anyway, whereby equipment like vehicles, for example, like ambulance, that's a hospital equipment, and equipment like even a CT scan, we don't think that definition should be included in what is called medical supplies. So here it is now. So we want to buy 100 ambulances, and then the ministry begins to do the procurement of that, as was the case with the cancer hospital. And they were even ready now to sign for some machines. At the point of signing the machine, then they were advised, no, medical supplies includes equipment, okay? And therefore, you cannot buy this equipment as cancer hospital. It has to be ZAMSA. So because ZAMSA is a different entity, so that is cancelled. They have to start all over again, another 3 months, and the rest is history. So we think that a number of legislations, acts that were put by our colleagues in the PF, we have found problems in a number of those. In some areas, we think that they didn't think through them very well. Okay, while some acts are good, but they have to be harmonized, and so we find that we are all going for amendments here, amendments there, because now when it comes to implementation, we find that it's a problem. That's why they themselves, like the ZAMSA Act, although they signed that it is being operationalized, they never operationalized it. They continued buying drugs. I suppose they saw that there was a problem, or they thought that there was still a problem, they needed to do certain things. What those things are, I don't know. Because once you think you need to do certain things, then don't sign. Don't sign, because you're not ready. But once you sign as minister, it means you're saying you're ready. Okay? So I've heard people saying, oh no, the function was given to ZAMSA before she did ABCD. There's nothing like that. I didn't have to give the function myself, because they themselves had operationalized the act by signing a statutory instrument which says now no more Minister of Health, this is now ZAMSA. So in following the act, we are an orderly government. You have to do what you have said you have to do. Now, because of all these things, one of the things we did, like last year in October, in November, when we saw that the drugs that ZAMSA had procured were for a short time, 2 months, then some of them 3 months, some of them 1 month, we realized that by November we would be running very low. So we had to take an administrative decision to save the Ministry of Health, or to save our hospitals. What did we do? We got money from ministry, from government, in form of grants, and gave them much more than was normally normal. So that part of that grant, we gave them the authority to be able to purchase on site, so that they don't fold their hands and they're waiting for the ZAMSA. We had to do something. So that's exactly what we did last time. And we saw that there was some stability in the month of November, October, and December. Because then we said, okay, next year, ZAMSA had made a bulk buy of what is called center kits. You know, center kits is just some package of drugs that are used in the lower clinics, like in the health posts and in the health centers, in the rural areas, and also in the towns. So they purchase drugs at that level, which would last almost a year, this year 2023. So, but of course, because these drugs were bought through some company from Denmark, which was also buying, although it was buying drugs from manufacturers in India, and the packaging was being done in India. So we were expecting that consignment end of April. But unfortunately, the drugs will not come in the month of April. We've been given a new date of May, between May and June, which is next month. This is April, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so by this time, we should have received that consignment, but it has been given some more time, maybe next month, May and June. That's when we expect that. So when we get that kind of bulk purchase, and it's for 1 year, then you know that you are capable of stabilizing that particular requirement. But now that is only for the hospitals or the clinics at the lower level, which fortunately forms the bulk of our health delivery system is at that level. I think we can safely say 60-70% of our health service delivery is done at that level. So if you stabilize at that level in terms of stabilizing the drug supply, then you know that you are doing a good thing, because we can manage to look after the people at that level. But that is only for that level of small level hospital, small level clinics, health centers and health posts. So what about the big hospitals? What about a hospital like Levy, UTH, cancer disease, these provincial hospitals? That now is a different ballgame, because the drugs there, those are mainly essential drugs.
Is this now how you went to Egypt?
Yes, I'm coming to that. Let's see if you're interested in Egypt. So now when it comes to the big hospitals,